party can't acquire land in any kind of a competitive process. So that means if it's listed with a realtor, they can't make an offer because that's a competitive process. We find this objectionable, to say the least. And what I'd really like to talk to is the spirit of this bill. Ever since House File 542, which is when I became the president, I've been here every year fighting the same issue over and over again, and that's the desire of this body to stop public land acquisition. And I don't know who you're trying to protect, because if it's the farmer, if you go to Secretary Nag's Iowa Agriculture website, there's 122,000 registered farm owners and operators in the state of Iowa. And there's over 3 million people, so that's less than 4% of the population. And yet they're controlling above 90% of the land, and I don't know why that isn't enough for them. There doesn't seem to be any effort to change. When I drive to Des Moines, it's a whole different place than it was 20 years ago. I see thousands of acres that used to be farmland, and now it's businesses and houses and things of that nature. Why aren't there bills to slow that progress down? And many of those businesses that came here were given a long-term tax abatement just to be here. You know, so that's my point. All these other people, I'm sure they have things to say too. And I really question why this type of bill, we're always given an absolute minimum amount of time to bring people here, because we'd have a lot more people here if we'd had 48 hours instead of just barely 24. Most of the people who are interested in this type of stuff have a full-time job in town, and they can't just call their boss at 9 o'clock at night and say, hey, I want to go to the Capitol tomorrow. So that's my point.
Ryan Schmidt, also opposed.
I'm Joe J. Jack, also opposed to the bill.
Tell us where you're from when you tell us it.
Yeah, Polk County.
I'm from Newton.
Okay, we want to keep on going, complete it.
I'm Kate Wilson from Des Moines, opposed.
Erin Van Voss from St. Mary's, but originally from a family farm in Remsen, Iowa. I'm opposed.
Darren Samuels, Adele, opposed. Nate Bill from Des Moines, opposed.
Emily Martin from Tella, opposed. Stacey Kubion, Urbandale, opposed.
Kevin Cutsworth, Windsor Heights, opposed.
Derek Minor, Story City, opposed.
Jessica Buff, Bondurant, opposed.
Erica Place, Huxley, opposed.
Sydney Aubrey Hunter, Des Moines, opposed. Camilla Price, Des Moines, opposed.
Amber Markham, I'm with the Nature Conservancy. Thank you for taking a moment to hear our comments. I have a brief statement, if that's okay?
Please.
Perfect. I'm registered in opposition to this bill because I believe it intends to help farmers in the short term, which I think is good, but at the cost of unknowingly harming them in the long run by making it harder for the DNR to own land. With ever-changing weather patterns and the need to think strategically and defensively about how we are going to protect Iowans and farmers from this harm. In recent years, Iowa ranked 4th in the nation in the number of floods in the last 30 years. Locating conservation lands in the floodplain provide benefits as flood reduction strategy. The public lands owned by the DNR are one of our best tools to protect against flood damage. We know that 51% of DNR land lies within the 100-year floodplain. Conservation land in the floodplain provides the water holding capacity during the flood event, protecting farms downstream. We also know that 80% of the DNR's land not in the floodplain is classified as highly erodible land. Conservation practices on highly erodible land help hold our precious topsoil in place during a flood or heavy rain event. Our topsoil is not a resource Iowans can afford to lose. Finally, 10% of the DNR's land is classified as a wetland. Wetlands help filter nitrates from our field runoff, made more extreme by heavier rains, to ensure that we have good water quality in Iowa, which is important to farmers. Increased water holding capacity to protect against flooded fields, topsoil retention, and nitrate filtration for high water quality are all important to farmers and made possible by DNR-owned lands. But farmers don't just stand to benefit from the flood defense that the DNR lands provide them. Many farmers may be caught in a situation where their land is no longer farmable and there are no buyers interested. Land that was once considered in the 100-year floodplain may now be flooding every 2 years. In recent years, we are seeing more farmers than ever reaching out for options to sell their land for conservation. Why? Not because NGOs in the DNR are aggressively competing with farmers to buy ag land, but because their land can no longer be properly farmed. We have 80 years of data from the United States Geological Survey that show that the rate of flooding has more than doubled. TNC also collects data on the Cedar River and shows that not only flooding events increase in frequency, but intensity of those events are also increasing. Farmers stand to lose more than anyone when flooding occurs, which is why we need to maintain options for farmers to recoup their losses on farm ground and floodplains. The flooding prompted farmers to use, so we have never seen this clear than when the Missouri River flooded in 2019. We had 460,000 acres of cropland left idle due to these floods. The estimated cost to acquire these easements was around $339 million, but unfortunately the federal government only had about $36 million. What does that tell us? The demand by farmers to have options to divest their land far exceeds the funding nationally. So why would we limit an option for farmers to be able to divest their land to the state DNR as an alternative way to recoup revenue on that land? That cannot be profitably farmed anymore. Why are we taking options away from farmers when we know this will happen again and the demand for farmers will not be met? Without adequate federal dollars and now with the threat of states' ability to buy the land being limited, farmers may have no good options. Our state policies must align with the times we are living in. Flooding events in Iowa will only get worse, creating greater need for the DNR land to provide water holding capacity, topsoil retention, and nitrate filtration during excessive rain events. More farmers will look to the DNR for ways to divest that land, and it no longer makes sense for them to operate their farms. I believe this bill attempts to solve the short-term needs of farmers, which I can appreciate coming from a long line of family farmers. But I do not believe this bill is in the best long-term interest of farmers or Iowans and does not meet the policy needs in the times that we are currently living. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Anna Gray. I'm with Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. We are registered against this bill. One of our concerns is the overbroad language that was already referenced, specifically the competitive manner, and in a free market economy that we all enjoy here in the United States, is the foundation of our economics and any land sale. But more than that, we have very serious concerns about how this legislation or similar legislation hinders the public benefits and opportunities in Iowa. We all know that parks, trails, and wildlife areas benefit Iowa significantly, from water quality, outdoor recreation, public health, mental and physical, economic development. And we know that not just because of the studies and the surveys, but because we've all enjoyed it. We've all enjoyed experiences in the outdoors. We see the benefits that it has to our communities. And we hear from people, many of whom are in this room, that want more of those opportunities. And so we agree that most land in Iowa is not suitable for public ownership. But there are some that are. And when those opportunities come about, how the landowner or landowners choose to divest of their property does not diminish the public benefit and opportunity of those lands. So, as you consider this bill and any other bills relating to this issue, I encourage you to think very deeply about the opportunities to enhance Iowa, to grow Iowa, to attract more Iowans and foster the quality of life that we want to enjoy, and the role that parks, trails, and wildlife areas can play within that. Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. David Peck with Ducks Unlimited. We do remain undecided on this bill, and we are here to monitor the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Adam Shirley. I'm representing Iowa's County Conservation System. I'll just echo briefly what some of the others said here. We work closely with Economic Development Authority and Iowa Tourism in order to serve our local communities and find out what services they're demanding and what they want. And overwhelmingly, we're opposed because we find that Iowans want more recreation, more opportunity for open spaces, and not restrictions on it. And if you look at some of the stats those folks that work really hard at Iowa Economic Development Authority and those entities pursue, the number one thing they find that people want to stay in Iowa or to move to Iowa or to keep job force retention, and this is rural and urban areas, is outdoor recreation. So I think it's a wise move for our state from a conservation standpoint and from an economic development standpoint to expand and not restrict public land acquisition.
I'm Pam Mackey Taylor, representing the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. We are opposed. I live in Marion, and we're opposed for the reasons that you already heard.
I'm Emily Mueller. I'm a landscape architect with Goldman Mink Engineering, and I have a little bit different lens, although I agree with all the things that have been said. I get to design those, improvements to those, public lands, so when things go into conservation, usually land has to be improved, that's part of my livelihood, and it's part of my family's quality of life, and I think it's important to the public.
Stacy Williams, also opposed. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, now live in Des Moines, and just wanted to echo, we were talking about our rural communities and bringing and keeping people here. Consistently, number one, and in the top of that list is access to public lands and outdoor space and trails and recreation, even before finding a job. So if we want to be competitive and keep especially some of our small communities thriving, we really need more access and not less. And working cooperatively with our partners that want those same goals.
Mike Minor, Osage, Iowa, opposed.
Jim Hanson, Worth County, opposed.
Susan Johnson, Carlisle, opposed.
Terry Walker, Des Moines, opposed.
Ross Baxter, Mineral, Iowa, opposed.
Chris Klingon, Roseville, Iowa, opposed.
I'm Teresa Arms, I'm here on behalf of the Iowa Rivers Revival, the YMCA, the Iowa Bicycle Coalition, Iowa Farmers Union, and the Iowa Environmental Council, and happy Wednesday as well. Thank you.
Todd Cottle, DNR, here to answer questions just a moment.
Eric Runson, on behalf of the almost 100 chapters and just over 20,000 members of Pheasants Forever across the state, we are opposed. For many of the reasons you mentioned about the language and the vagueness of the language, primarily, it's not necessarily that there couldn't be guardrails. It's that this particular bill isn't written in a way that would be tenable for us. And then Iowa Bow Hunters Association is also registered opposed to the bill. Thanks.
Phil Jennery with the Iowa Sportsman's Club. We are registered opposed, and for the sake of time, just echo the comments of the senators before us.
Good morning, Joe McGovern, President of Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, for my colleague, Anna Gray. I'll defer those comments, but I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
Good morning, Senators. Matt Gronwald with Farm Bureau, and we're registered in support of the bill. Our members strongly believe that government should not be in the business of competing against our citizens when buying land. It's our understanding, and we certainly appreciate that this is the current DNR practice. And so we'd like to just see this current DNR practice codified.
I got a meal soon.
Anyone else who's done pretty darn well? Senator Bennett.
Everybody for the information. At this time, I do have some concerns with the bill. I'm not comfortable signing on to move forward. I thank everybody for the information.
Appreciate everybody.
Senator Queen.
I appreciate everybody coming today and taking time out of your personal lives to express concerns. That some of the language can be improved with this bill, the guardrails which we had talked about. And as for the competitiveness, between our young farmers trying to get started and government entities, that's our concern with this, and that's why we brought this bill forward. I have some young guys that wanted to start a cattle operation, but they couldn't because after the land got purchased and now it's within a different entity. So that's my big concern about this. As for water quality, my hat's off to our Iowa IDOLs and also DNR with the nutrient reduction strategy that we have in place. I think our individuals from the DNR and also IDOLs have done a great job. In fact, there are different states, Minnesota and Illinois, are both working on modeling their nutrient reduction strategy from Iowa's. So that's been a cooperative effort. And so with this bill, I know that we all have our passions, and I thank everybody for being here.
Thank you. I got a couple emails this morning I thought was interesting, that somebody said, well, if I want to sell my land to the DNR, I would be allowed to. Guess what? You can do that. Nobody says that you can't do that. Is that correct, Mr. Call?
Correct.
There are people that if you want to sell it to them, if you want to give it to them, if you want to sell it or give it to the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, you can do so. Nothing's going to stop you from doing that. And many people seem to think that this is just going to bring that to a halt, and it does not. You're going to be allowed to do with your land what you want. And
unless you're in the CRP program or some kind of other government program, and then they will dictate to you how you're going. If you've got big ideas doing something, you're gonna have to pass most of the things first. Now, that all said, I think this thing does need some touching up. We have visited with different groups and to talk about those things. And I think I'm ready to recommend passage with amendment, because there are some things that we get into this competitive process. What was the term we looked at that gave you pause? Anyway, competitiveness, that's the thing that gives me a little bit of uneasiness on what that really means. I will sign off on with amendment, and we'll develop those, and you'll see all that, and hopefully next time you're gonna have a little more time, and apologize again for how all this worked. Don't ever blame me for technology not working, because I don't use it enough to know how to screw something up. So, anyway, thank you all for coming. I've got a lot of emails this morning. Interestingly enough, I've got 3,000 square miles in my district, maybe the second largest district in Iowa. I have yet to receive from my district. So that may give you some food for thought as to how different people in different parts of Iowa, not in Polk County and Dallas County and so forth, feel about this. Just for information purposes. Thank you very much.